All right, what I'm going to tell you are some repair hell stories. In other words, you get yourself into a situation where you're helping somebody fix something and they do something wrong repeatedly and you catch it, then they hate you. Well, anyway, this one guy was taking the transmission out of his car. It had burnt up and he sent it through a friend to school, and the kids rebuilt the transmission. He put it back in the car. It lasted a few days and burnt up again. And they took it out again and they sent it back to the school, and the teacher stepped in and he's getting involved with the kids. They rebuild the transmission, send it back to the guy, puts it in, last 3 days, goes bad again. So I'll cut to the chase. The guy kept putting in the burnt transmission fluid. He would drain the transmission, save the fluid, put the burnt transmission fluid back in. See, this is the type of knuckleheads you deal with. Now, I told you the story about the Harley Davidson generator. The guy was putting the sleeve on the bolt that holds the generator in, and at some point it got ratty. He left it off, and that allowed the bolt that goes through the generator to touch the wires that go from the brushes. Which they go from the brushes. Well, anyway, the brushes and wires have to have a sleeve on them, but the guy that rebuilds left the sleeves off, so you then need the insulation on the bolt. And when I came into it, the insulation on the bolt was missing, and the insulation on the brush wires was missing, and I was going nuts. Okay, and then finally I had the guy take the generator back to the guy, open it up and look at it one more time, and he realized he left the wires off, the sleeves off the wires. They're asbestos sleeves. And then I then realized that the reason my friend never had problem before was because he had the sleeve on the bolt. But these are the things, when you're in them, you like, what the hell's going on? It's like the guy driving the brand new car only goes so many blocks and shut down. And what happened was he took his wife's keys. Well, it was a valet key. It had a chip in it, but it would only let the engine run for so many minutes. And that's just enough time for the person to park the car, so they can't take it for a joyride. All right? So the guy came in, told us the story at the hardware store. I told him when he figured out what it was, come back and tell us. He told us. That was a great story. In other words, you have the key, it's got a chip in it. You start the car up, you go driving. After a few minutes, the car shuts down. You take the car back to the dealership. They have no clue what's wrong with the car. They bring an expert in from another area, and he traces it down to the fact that you have the valet key instead of the regular driver's key. Incredible stuff. This other friend of mine, he built these giant speaker systems. I mean, size of china cabinets. This is back in the days when people really weren't into stereo bass as he was. So he wires the speakers up. He has the whole cabinet all done. He wires the speakers into the front plate, and he's got the front plate out, and he's got the speakers all phased correctly, and every time he turns up the power halfway, the fuser breaker goes. I don't remember what it was. The breaker popped. So it goes back and forth. He comes in tech school, and he's telling me about the speakers shutting down. And I told him, as soon as you find out what this is, let me know. So he calls me up, and here's what it was. He got in touch with the people that made the speakers, and they realized that they figured it out. They said to him, do you have the cabinet closed up? And my friend says, no, I'm testing it before I close it up. And the guy says, the impedance of the speaker, free air. In other words, if you have a speaker in the air, say it's 8 ohms, and it's free to move without any resistance, its impedance is actually lower. So by putting it in the cabinet and buttoning up the cabinet, and you got a base port in the back, there's only a certain amount of air that can flow. The speaker's 8 ohms, it won't pop the breaker. That's incredible stuff, okay? And this is what, whenever somebody had a really wackadoodle problem, I would say to them, let me know what you find, and I'll keep it in my head. And then the other one was, I bought a used car, and a person helped me change the wiring on the car, and the car didn't run right. So they had all their thing. Oh, you need this, you need a valve job, blah, 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 the whole thing. It turned out when they helped me change the wires, they reversed two plugs. And how I found it was I had the car running, and I was pulling one spark plug off at a time, the wire off one at a time. And I realized I had two that did nothing. And I knew I had done the compression of those cylinders. So the person standing there with me, I said, I'm going to reverse the two wires. No, that'll cause it to backfire. I reversed it and fixed it. I realized the first genius that had done the wiring for me screwed up. Okay, those are the things. And then the same two geniuses couldn't figure out why the valve covers were leaking. The first one told me you have to have rubber gaskets on, and you got to use the cement to hold the rubber gaskets on the valve cover. The other one wanted me to use cork, so I kept going back and forth. What it really turned out to be, and they said you need a torque wrench and all that. Well, they were over torquing the bolts, and they warped the valve cover by the bolt. And one of the valve cover gaskets, when I picked it up, it had a little brochure that came with it, and it said basically inspect the valve cover around each hole and make sure it's not deformed by the bolt. And it also recommended using those washer things. They're a washer, but they're shaped like I'll say a T. And I went and got those. It tells you to hammer the valve cover. You put the cover on a flat surface, and you use a hammer, and you hammer the deflected valve cover section near the hole back down. You level it off. I never had valve cover leak ever again. Nobody around me ever had the problem ever again because I found the trick. Okay, I said okay again. The other thing in life is when you work with high power things, say a print head on the old printer, impact printers. The print head can get a short in it. One of the wires, the driver, the wire that goes in and out the solenoid, it gets a short. So as soon as you hook it up to the new board and turn it on, you've killed the board. Now, if you change the print head again, the board is shorted and it'll burn the print head out. So the syndrome is called killer printer, killer print head. The same thing can happen when you deal with stepper motors on CNC machines. If you've got a shorted motor, you're going to burn out the stepper driver. And then that stepper driver can kill a new motor. You go back and forth. What you have to do is you have to change both at the same time. Right? This is what I call repair hell. And from over the years, all the repairs I did, I always got the thing that somebody else already bodged or destroyed. And the person would come to me and everybody's telling me you'll be able to fix this. Yeah, I'll be able to fix it, or I'll lose several nights sleep until I zero in on what the hell the person did. Now, the one person wanted to show off to the other kid, so he changed the points in the kid's MGB. I think it's the initials of the car. He put both shoulder washers on one side of the points. So for days, they couldn't get the car to start. I walk over there, and I had my Heathkit meter, and I have him turn it over, and I said, the points aren't working right. And I look in there, and I see the shoulder washers. Both of them are on the same side. I've never seen an MGB car before. And I undo the bolt, and I lift it out, and I put a shoulder washer on the bottom, a shoulder washer on the top. I put the bolt back on. I set the points until we get it running. And then there's an adjustment on some cars. You can adjust the points, the dwell, while it's running. I had the Heathkit meter. I set it in. And the guy that did the tune-up got mad and went in the house. And I was waiting for him to come back out. And the guy whose car it was, he says, he's not coming back out. He says, you pissed him off. You showed him up. I said, he asked me to look at it to fix it. And he goes, yeah, but you embarrassed him that he did something stupid. And I'm like, wow. And this is a kid I grew up with. And he started to get like that. And he ended up screwing me out of some money because he didn't like me. You think when you're helping people and you point out stuff like when I told you, when I walk along and I point to someone, I say, you have that jack upside down. The big part goes on the ground. That little hook piece goes under the car in a little spot. No, you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. So now I just go by people that got the car up in the air. I don't get involved. They don't want you to help them. Okay? I said okay again. I'm going to keep reminding the guy that watches my video every time I say okay. Okay? I said okay. And I just want to tell you, as a repair person, you're going to get the really tough ones. And you'll stay in it until you fix it, or you'll give up. And I had so many things over the years that were intermittents. And those are a bad solder joint. In brand new radios, it could be the switches. The switches sat in a warehouse somewhere, and the contact points in the switches have oxidized, jet black. And I would take the switch apart. Someone says, that radio is brand new. I said, I don't care what it is. I said, the radio is brand new, but they put a part in it that's been sitting for a long time. And some contacts are self-cleaning. As you turn them, they self-clean. But if the switch sits for a long period of time in a warehouse, some switches, especially silver, really good switches, gets a really bad oxide on it, and the switch won't work. And I've had years and years of experience, and I take the switch apart and I'm cleaning it. I told you I use an eraser, and the people argue me, just spray it with deox. Go away from me. I've had enough of those guys. I'm the guy that always had to fix someone else's screw up. That's why I have an attitude problem. I don't get the unit when it first breaks. I get it after someone has repaired it several times. A person gave me a VCR, and they didn't want it anymore. I've had it back to that guy 3 times, and it was the load belt kept breaking. Well, the millennium grease, whatever the hell it is, got thicker and thicker and thicker until the mechanisms didn't move anymore. So I took the VCR apart, and I cleaned all the gears, and then I went and read a book on VCRs, and it says you'll be out of sync, it'll never resynchronize. And I had marked the gears. So I put the gears back in, and when I turned the VCR, it went in one direction. Click, 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 shut down. Turned it on again, it went the other way. Click, 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 and then it worked. What it had was, they had figured that when the girl on the assembly line puts the gears in, they had a simple little clicking clutch. It was great. And the VCR book I read at the library told me that VCR, you won't be able to get the synchronization. So when I took the gears apart, I put all kinds of marks. And I was still off by a couple teeth, but the thing resynchronized itself. But you don't know until you try something. But my problem was, I was always working on something after somebody had already doctored it or bodged it. And that creates a real, like the person would say to you, gee, that's taking you a long time to fix that. Meanwhile, it's been touched by people that have no idea what they're doing. Things are in backwards, things are, the one girl gave me a mix master. And when you put the brushes in the motor, if you put them in the wrong way, they won't touch the motor. So I pulled the brushes out and I rotated them, and it fired up. So I bring it back to her, and the next day she says, it still don't work right. I said, but it's running. She said, I said, tell me the whole story. Well, my father tried to fix it. It would have been nice if that girl told me that she was trying to break up brown sugar with it, and she broke the gear system. And then her dad tried to fix it. Instead of working on the gear system, he pulled the brushes out of the motor, put them in the wrong way. I found that, thinking that was the problem. I did test for torque, but of course, the mixmaster would no longer, the gears were messed up. It would no longer mix like really thick, heavy stuff, because the gear would skip, because she had put in a block of cement, brown sugar, a big block. Well, I thought it could handle that. You thought wrong, and you got me sucked into it. I didn't make any money on that repair, and that's what I had, a whole life of that crap. And even here, people, well, can you look at it? Look at it means fix it for free. No, throw it out, go buy another one. It's made in China. I can't get the parts. Well, can't you get the parts at Radio Shack? And then when you say Radio Shack's basically out of business, well, the last one the guy did to me, there's a ham radio club down in the city. Maybe they have the parts. He needed a stereo fix so he can sell it. It's a high end, it's worth a lot of money. Yeah, it's worth a lot of money if it's working. If it's been recapped lately, what you got there is not even a boat anchor. I think that's it. All right, that's it.